The ad read, "Quiet roommate wanted. Must tolerate classical music, red wine, and privacy. Rent negotiable. No pets, no garlic." Ethan laughed out loud when he saw it. No garlic. Was this chick allergic to seasoning? Still, the rent said 0 with arrangement, and he was 2 days away from couch surfing at his ex's place. So he messaged. Lucia responded within 10 minutes, in perfect grammar and no emojis. "Come after sunset." That should have been his first clue. He arrived at 7:30 p.m. with his only suitcase and a laptop that wheezed every time it opened Chrome. The apartment was weird. Not dirty, just old. Elegant wood floors, velvet curtains, candles in actual wall sconces. It smelled like roses and dust and maybe something metallic. Lucia answered the door in a silk robe, like it was the most normal thing in the world. She was stunning. Not Instagram stunning, Gothic oil painting stunning. Her eyes locked onto his like he'd just wandered into her territory. And maybe he had. "You're Ethan," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, slight accent, like someone who'd watched too many old movies but never left the theater. "You're Lucia," he replied. "So, no garlic?" She gave a faint smile. "I have allergies." They talked. She gave him a tour. The apartment had high ceilings, antique bookshelves, no mirrors, and one room that was always locked. "Storage," she said. Ethan didn't ask. He was focused on the part where she said he could stay rent-free. "There is a unique condition," Lucia said, pouring him wine that looked darker than it should. "I feed, not without consent, never without consent." Ethan blinked. "Feed? Like, emotionally?" She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, like blood?" She nodded once, calmly. "Once a week, minimal. I do not bite without permission. I do not kill, and I am very clean." He chuckled nervously. "Right. Totally normal Craigslist stuff." She didn't laugh. He didn't run. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was her voice. Maybe it was the fact that he had nowhere else to go. And something about her made him feel like she'd already known that. "So," Ethan said, after a long pause, "do I sign something?" Lucia leaned in just slightly. "Only if you want to." He never remembered agreeing. But when he woke up the next morning in a perfectly made bed, feeling oddly energized, with a tiny pinprick on his neck and a note that read, "Welcome," he figured he had. Ethan spent the day wandering the apartment like a guest on a haunted Airbnb tour. Everything was immaculate, strangely curated. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a vampire drama. Curtains too thick to let even a sliver of sunlight in, and not a single working outlet in the bedroom. His phone was at 4%. His trust in his life choices, about the same. Lucia was nowhere to be seen. He figured she was sleeping, or maybe hanging upside down in the locked storage room. Who knew? By sunset, he was half convinced the whole thing had been a weird dream, until the smell of roasting something filled the kitchen. It was warm, spiced, tempting. Lucia was at the stove. Yes, the stove. Cooking. She wore a long black dress now, buttoned high at the collar, and still somehow more seductive than most of Ethan's exes in lingerie. "You cook?" he asked, like it was the weirdest part of this arrangement. "I host," she said without looking back. "It's polite to feed guests." Ethan slid into the chair across the kitchen island. He noticed 2 wine glasses, one filled with the same black-red liquid as before, the other held actual red wine. Or, he hoped. "So," he started, then hesitated. "Last night wasn't a dream, right?" She stirred the pan. Her hands moved like she was performing a ritual. "Number you gave consent. Right. Was I supposed to feel something?" "You may notice stronger dreams, increased energy, minor sensitivity to sunlight. Do you?" with a guy who once Googled if birds have knees. Lucia's smile was slow, wicked. I like simple company. It reminds me what's still alive. Ethan flushed. He didn't mean to. Her eyes did something to him, something he couldn't explain. She reached across the island slowly and touched his wrist, ice cold. "You have strong blood," she said quietly. "Not just the taste, the rhythm. It's passionate." His pulse quickened, which probably made it worse. "Cool. Thanks. I guess my blood flirts." Lucia's smile sharpened. "It does." He laughed nervously, stood up to escape the tension, and knocked over his wine glass. Lucia moved in an instant, too fast. Before he could blink, she caught the glass mid-fall, placed it gently down, and leaned in close. "Careful," she whispered. "Accidents attract attention." Ethan didn't sleep much that night, not because he was scared, but because every time he closed his eyes, he swore he could feel breath on his neck, and somewhere down the hall behind that locked door, something whispered his name. Ethan woke up drenched in sweat. His sheets were twisted around his legs like vines. The room was cold, but his skin burned. He reached for his phone. Dead. Again. He was starting to suspect the apartment fed off battery life and personal boundaries in equal measure. He shuffled to the kitchen, half expecting Lucia to be standing there with another cryptic smirk and a bowl of blood cereal. But the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Even the fridge didn't hum. A white envelope lay on the counter with his name in perfect calligraphy. "Out until moonrise. Help yourself. Do not open the basement door." He hadn't known there was a basement door. Naturally, that was now the only thing he wanted to do. He found it tucked behind a velvet curtain near the back of the living room. Heavy, wood, with a curved iron handle. There wasn't a lock, but it felt sealed, like the air around it had rules. His fingers hovered over the handle, just for a second. Then the hallway light flickered, and a low creak echoed from the ceiling. Not the basement. Upstairs. His room. He spun around. "Lucia," he called. His voice cracked in the middle, like a teenager caught watching something he shouldn't. No reply. When he turned back, the curtain had closed itself. By the time Lucia returned, hours later, no sound, no warning, Ethan was sitting on the floor of the kitchen, drinking what was probably her wine. He held up the bottle like it was a peace offering. "You have a door," he said, trying to sound casual. "You told me not to open it." She took the bottle gently from his hand and set it down without drinking. "I appreciate obedience," she said softly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to turn me on or scare me." Lucia leaned in, her fingers brushing the side of his neck, feather-light. What if it's both? His breath caught. There was something in the way she looked at him. Hunger, but not just for blood. Curiosity, amusement, heat. He wanted to kiss her. He didn't. Not because he was afraid she'd bite him, but because he wasn't sure what he'd do if she didn't. She drew back. Just enough. "You're starting to like this," she said. He laughed once. "Define this. The blood donations, the mystery, the accidental vampire kink." Lucia's smile widened. She walked past him toward the hallway. Her voice floated over her shoulder like smoke. "You define it, Ethan. You're the one staying." He stood there long after she disappeared, unsure whether he was living in a seduction or a slow-burning trap. And for the first time, he wasn't sure which one he preferred. Ethan started keeping track of the noises. Not just the creaks of old wood or the occasional gust of wind that moaned through the chimney. These were deliberate, rhythmic, almost human, like footsteps pacing behind walls, breathing beneath the floorboards, whispered fragments of his own name, pronounced just slightly wrong. He told himself It was just the building settling. Or maybe Lucia playing vampire mind games. She probably got off on it. He wouldn't be surprised if she had a bat costume and dry ice hidden somewhere just to mess with him. But the tension in his gut said otherwise. He hadn't seen her feed since that first night. Not directly. But he'd wake sometimes to faint red smears in the sink. A single drop of something dark on the counter. And once, worst of all, a bite mark on his collarbone that hadn't been there before he went to sleep. He wanted to ask. He didn't. Partly because he didn't know if he wanted the answer. Partly because every time she came close, his brain short-circuited. Tonight, she joined him on the couch. No preamble, just sat down beside him like she hadn't avoided contact all week. She wore a midnight blue dress with sleeves that floated like smoke and bare feet that made no sound when she moved. "You're avoiding me," she said. Ethan blinked. "I literally live in your house." "You're avoiding me," she repeated, quieter. "But you're curious. I feel it. Your blood stirs when you think about me." "That's not blood," he muttered. Lucia tilted her head. "Number that's something else." Her fingers grazed his wrist, just 2 fingertips. It sent a bolt of heat up his arm. She leaned in, and for a second he swore she was going to kiss him, but she paused, just inches away. "You don't trust me." "I'm not sure if I should," he whispered. Her breath tickled his cheek. "You shouldn't." Then she stood, graceful, effortless, dangerous. "Come with me." He followed, because of course he did. She led him to the back hallway again, to that door, the basement. It wasn't locked, not this time. Lucia placed her hand on the handle, but didn't open it. "There are things down there I can't control," she said softly. "Old things, older than me. They remember everything that enters." Ethan's throat went dry. "Why are you showing me this?" Lucia turned to him, and her expression changed. For once, it wasn't playful or seductive. It was something closer to fear, or maybe regret. "Because they know your name now," she said. "And I'm not sure that was part of the arrangement." She opened the door. The stairs descended into blackness like a throat. And far, far below, something moved. The steps groaned beneath Ethan's feet as he followed Lucia down the basement stairs. The darkness wasn't just lack of light. It felt like a presence. Heavy, watching, almost breathing. Lucia didn't use a flashlight. She moved like she could see everything, or like she didn't need to. Ethan clung to the railing with one hand and gripped the wall with the other, trying not to think about the way shadows curled unnaturally around the corners. The air grew colder with each step. Damp, metallic, familiar. He knew the smell. Blood. Lucia stopped at the base of the stairs. There was a corridor, narrow and curved, lined with stone that didn't match the rest of the apartment. This was older, deeper, not built for people. "This place isn't yours," Ethan whispered. Lucia didn't answer right away. Then finally, "It's borrowed." The walls had markings, symbols he didn't recognize, some drawn in paint, others not paint. "Why bring me here?" he asked. She turned to face him. Her face was pale in the low light, eyes darker than usual, lips parted like she might bite or confess. "Because you already heard them, felt them. They know you now. If you keep living upstairs, pretending this doesn't exist, they'll come anyway, through dreams, through whispers, through the cracks. Who are they?" Lucia hesitated. "They are the price." "For what?" "For being who I am, for living how I live. This place feeds, just like I do." Ethan felt the chill run under his skin. "Feeds on what?" She didn't answer. A low sound rose from the corridor. Not a growl, not a voice, but something in between, like someone laughing into a scream. Lucia flinched. Ethan stepped back. Okay, no offense, but I think I'm good with the upstairs studio and occasional neck nibble. Lucia caught his arm. Firm, not forceful, not yet, but the strength was there, barely restrained. You can leave the basement, she said, but they're part of you now. They touched your blood. They tasted your dreams. He yanked away from her, stumbling back onto the stairs. This was not in the ad. Lucia's voice dropped low, almost pleading. Ethan. He paused. She stepped closer, close enough to smell her skin. Not perfume, not rosewater, but something like dark earth and thunder. I'm trying to protect you, she said, but I am not the only thing that wants you anymore. His mouth opened to reply, but behind her in the corridor, a shape unfurled, long, impossible, slick with something that shimmered in the dark. Ethan ran. He didn't stop until he was upstairs, slamming the basement door behind him and dragging a chair against it like that would do anything. The apartment was dead silent again, but different now. Like the walls knew what he'd seen. And worse, like they'd liked that he saw it. The chair didn't help. Neither did the salt circle, or the hastily Googled how to banish ancient entities you accidentally flirted with. Nothing helped. Ethan barely slept. When he did, his dreams were flooded with voices, soft and sharp, like velvet wrapped around knives. They called to him from endless hallways, from rooms filled with dripping walls and empty beds. Lucia's name echoed too, tangled with his, like they were already linked in some awful erotic pact. In the mirror the next morning, he noticed it. A dark vein pulsing along his neck, subtle but new, the same side she bit. Lucia didn't speak of the basement again, but her behavior changed. She hovered, always nearby, always watching. She'd appear in the kitchen before he made coffee, brushing past him too close, her cold fingertips grazing his bare arm like she was drawing runes into his skin. She didn't smile as much anymore. She looked hungry. Are you feeding? He asked her one evening, half joking. Lucia looked at him for a long time. Not enough. He didn't ask what enough meant. That night, he caught movement in his room. Not her, not human. It shimmered for just a moment in the corner of his vision. Long-limbed, mouthless, crawling across the ceiling like smoke with bones. When he snapped the lamp on, nothing was there, but the sheets were damp, with something that smelled like iron. He sat awake until dawn, staring at the bedroom door. It stayed shut, but the shadows underneath it moved, as if pacing. Lucia found him the next morning curled on the couch, eyes red, skin clammy. I can make it stop, she said softly, but I need more. More what? He asked, voice raw. She leaned down, close, closer. More of you. He wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, he just stared at her. This beautiful monster, this siren with teeth. You said this wasn't about killing me. It's not, she whispered. It's about changing you. He stood too fast. I didn't ask to be changed. Lucia rose slowly. You said yes. That first night, you were lonely, curious. You let me in. They took that as an invitation. Who are they? Her eyes darkened, no longer hiding the truth. My makers, my shadows, the things that wait in the cracks when immortality gets lonely. He backed away. Lucia sighed. You're not running yet, she said. That's a good sign. He laughed, dry, bitter. Maybe I'm too tired, or maybe I just want you to admit it. Admit what? That you like me. Lucia smiled, not wickedly, not cruelly, just softly. I do. And somehow, that scared him more than everything else. The apartment began to change, subtly at first. Cabinets closed by themselves. Mirrors no longer reflected him clearly. The walls felt closer, breathing, watching. Whispers fluttered through the vents even when the air was off. He stopped leaving, not because he wasn't allowed, but because the outside world felt like fiction now. A fuzzy memory. Every time he opened the front door, something pulled at his spine, like he was being peeled from the place that had already claimed him. Lucia noticed. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply began spending more time near him, reading silently in the same room, brushing her cold fingertips across the back of his hand, pressing her lips to his neck, not to bite, but to feel. Ethan was scared, but more terrifying than the fear was how much he wanted her now, how much he missed her when she left the room, how much of himself he had already given, willingly. One night, he found himself standing at the basement door again. He didn't remember walking there. Lucia appeared behind him, barefoot, her hair wet like she'd stepped out of the sea, not the shower. "You hear them again," she said. "They're louder," Ethan whispered, "and I feel wrong, different." Lucia stepped closer. "They've touched you. They like you. That makes one of us." "You don't mean that." "I don't know what I mean anymore." He turned to face her. "Am I dying?" Lucia tilted her head. "Number, you're transforming." "Into what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she kissed him, not teasingly, not playfully, desperately. It was electric, ice and fire and hunger and grief all at once. His hands found her waist, her back, her throat. Her teeth scraped his bottom lip, drawing blood, and she moaned softly like it was the finest wine she'd ever tasted. When they broke apart, they were both panting. Ethan's hands trembled. "You didn't take much," he whispered. Lucia stared into him like she saw more than blood and bone. "I didn't need to. You've already given me what matters." "What did I give you?" She stepped back. "Your name," she said. "Your fear. Your want." He heard it then. His name, whispered from the cracks in the walls, from under the floor, from inside his own mouth before he even spoke. He dropped to his knees. His reflection in the hallway mirror no longer blinked. Ethan didn't leave the hallway floor for hours. He lay there, staring at the mirror that no longer matched his movements. The reflection breathed when he didn't. It licked its lips when he pressed his mouth shut. It smiled. Lucia didn't try to move him. She simply watched, crouched beside him like a predator waiting to see if her prey would turn feral. "Is this it?" he whispered. "Am I becoming one of them?" Lucia shook her head. "You're becoming one of us." He laughed, cracked and broken. "What's the difference?" She didn't answer. Later, he stood, washed his face, and stared at the bite marks on his neck. Now 4. New ones. Fainter than before, but glowing faintly in the dark. He didn't remember her biting him again. But it didn't feel like a violation anymore. It felt like a pact. The apartment was no longer a place. It was a thing. Alive. Breathing with him. Walls warm to the touch. Floors that hummed when he walked. Shadows that curled around his ankles like cats. He opened the fridge to find a single item. A tall glass bottle, stoppered, half full of a thick red liquid. It wasn't wine. He drank it anyway. Lucia stood in the doorway, watching, her expression unreadable. "You said you weren't here to kill me," he said. "I'm not." "Then why am I disappearing?" She stepped forward. "Because you don't belong anywhere else anymore." "Did you do this to me on purpose?" She looked away, and that was his answer. He didn't feel anger, not really, just resignation. And beneath that, arousal, terror, wonder. He was unraveling, and it felt like falling in love with something that had no face. That night, the whispers stopped being whispers. They spoke in full sentences, clear, cold, beautiful. They told him secrets. Lucia sat cross-legged at the foot of his bed, hands in her lap, like a statue of devotion or punishment. "Do you want them gone?" she asked. He hesitated and smiled. "No, the days lost their names." Ethan stopped checking the calendar. His phone died, and he didn't charge it. He no longer needed alarms. The house told him when it was time to sleep, to eat, to wake, to listen. Lucia wasn't sleeping anymore either. She sat for hours at the dining room table, sketching with fingers dipped in something dark and glistening. Symbols he couldn't read, shapes that moved when he looked too long. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "Reminders," she murmured. "Warnings, invitations. Which one is mine?" Lucia glanced up. "You were an invitation the moment you moved in." The basement door was always open now. Sometimes he found himself standing at the top of the stairs, with no memory of how he got there. The air below called to him, heavy, hot, filled with breath that didn't belong to just him. At night, he didn't dream anymore. He shared. He saw through Lucia's eyes, running through woods soaked in moonlight, tasting hearts that beat too fast, hearing the screams of people who never knew monsters wore silk robes and smiled kindly. And he saw through the house's eyes, too. It remembered all who'd come before. The lovers who bled for pleasure, the priests who screamed for forgiveness, the liars, the wanderers, the hungry ones. Ethan wasn't afraid anymore. He was waiting. But for what? He didn't know. Until the knocking started. It came at midnight. 3 slow knocks on the front door. Lucia froze, mid-sketch. Her hand trembled. "They shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Who?" She stood slowly. "The ones who want you back." Ethan didn't move. Not because he was afraid of what was on the other side of the door, but because part of him wanted to open it. The knocking came again, louder, more insistent. The walls of the apartment shivered. Lucia grabbed his wrist. "Don't listen to them." "I'm not. You're thinking about it." Ethan turned to her. "I think about everything now. That's the problem." A deep voice came through the wood. It wasn't angry. It was familiar. "Ethan, come home. You don't belong here." He blinked. The voice was his mother's. Except his mother had been dead for years. Lucia's grip tightened. "They're testing you. I don't know what's real anymore." She leaned closer. "Does it matter?" He looked down at his hands. The skin beneath his fingernails was blackening. He didn't open the door, but he stood near it, close enough to hear the scratching, close enough to feel the cold breath sneaking under the frame, the kind of cold that smelled like old hospitals and fresh dirt. "Ethan," the voice repeated, "please, we can help you. This isn't who you are." Lucia didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The house did it for her. The floor beneath his feet pulsed like a heartbeat. The wallpaper curled back from the corners. The chandelier above the door creaked softly, then bled one slow droplet of something black. "Tell me it's not real," Ethan whispered. Lucia's eyes were wet, but not with tears, with hunger. "It's real," she said. "All of it. Them, me, you." The knocking stopped, and in the silence that followed, the walls spoke. They didn't use words, not really, just sensation, memory, color. He saw a hallway of bone, leading to a door that breathed. He saw a man who wasn't a man, smiling as his teeth fell out one by one. He saw himself, sitting on a throne of mirrors, staring at his reflection, whispering secrets to 1,000 versions of himself who never escaped. Lucia touched his face. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For letting you think there was a choice." That night, the apartment swallowed the front door. Not physically. It looked the same. But when he touched the knob, he felt nothing. Like it led nowhere. Like it had never opened at all. was no longer available. Not to him. Not anymore. He spent the next day pacing, not frantic, not angry, just still trying to understand what part of him had wanted this from the start. And then near midnight, he descended the basement stairs again. Lucia waited at the bottom. She was barefoot, cloaked in something that shimmered like oil slicks in nightmares. Around her feet, shadows curled like lovers. "You came," she said. "I don't know why." "Yes, you do." He took the last step, and the lights above them went out, but he didn't need them. He could see in the dark now, not with eyes, with instinct. The basement stretched longer than it should have. Walls lined with windows that showed things that couldn't be real. Oceans made of mouths, skies that pulsed, people running from things they'd already become. Lucia took his hand. "You're almost ready," she whispered. "For what?" "To meet them." He didn't ask who, because deep inside, he already knew. The staircase didn't end. It twisted, coiled, bled downward like it was alive, and Ethan followed without question. There was no time here, no temperature, just pressure, thick and heavy, like being watched through 1,000 locked doors, all of them slowly creaking open. Lucia walked beside him, silent, reverent. Her bare feet never made a sound, but Ethan's steps echoed like thunder. "Where are we going?" he finally asked. Lucia smiled. "To meet the ones who remember you." "I don't remember them." She glanced sideways. "That's what makes it easier." The hallway shifted. The walls began breathing, slow, wet, rhythmic. Not air, not wind, just breathe. The ceiling sagged above them like stretched skin. Faces pushed through for moments, twisted, eyeless, whispering, then melted back into the flesh like plaster. Ethan didn't flinch. He should have screamed, should have run. But now, even his fear felt nostalgic. They reached a door at the very end, tall, rounded, pulsing faintly with veins like roots. No knob, no keyhole, just a small, dark slit in the center. Lucia looked at him. "You open it." "With what?" She didn't speak. She just stepped forward, pressed her forehead to his chest, and whispered a single word in a language he didn't know, but understood. Suddenly, Ethan's skin itched. His hands burned. The mark on his neck, the first bite, began glowing, pulsing to a rhythm he hadn't heard before. His blood answered the door, and the door opened. The room inside wasn't a room. It was an eye, a massive living sphere that blinked as he stepped in, the pupil widening to swallow the light, the walls shimmering like tears. Beneath it stood figures, shapes, not quite people, not quite beasts. Some wore flesh, others wore memories, and they all looked at him. Lucia knelt. "This is him," she said, "the one you chose." Ethan didn't ask who they were. He remembered. He had met them before, not in this life maybe, but in pieces, in dreams, in near-death moments, in quiet rooms where he felt something watching and thought it was just imagination. It was them, and now he belonged. The tallest of the figures stepped forward. No face, no name, just a voice, echoing not in the room, but in Ethan's mind. "You are almost complete," it said. "Do you wish to finish?" Ethan opened his mouth. No words came, just a smile, and the sound of his heart slowing down, then stopping. But Ethan didn't fall, because he wasn't human anymore. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep, or dying, or waking up. It all felt the same now, like flipping pages of a book he hadn't realized he was writing. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't in the eye room anymore. He was back in the apartment. Everything looked the same. The kitchen with the cracked mug on the counter, the hallway mirror, the old sofa with the blanket Lucia always used. Only this time, The silence had a shape. It moved with him. He walked barefoot through the apartment. The floor didn't creak. It sighed. He wasn't breathing, but he didn't need to. The reflection in the hallway mirror blinked a second too late. It smiled when he didn't. Lucia was gone, but her scent remained. Lavender and something darker, iron maybe, or longing. On the table lay a note in handwriting he didn't recognize, but somehow understood. It's your turn now. Feed the house. Let it choose. That night, there was a knock on the door. 3 slow, careful taps. Ethan opened it. A girl stood there, maybe early 20s, holding a letter, chewing on her lower lip, nervous, hopeful, human. "Hi," she said. "I'm here about the room for rent." Ethan nodded. "Of course," he said, stepping aside. She walked past him, looking around. "This place is weird," she said, half laughing, "but kinda cool." Ethan closed the door behind her. It didn't make a sound, just a long, low sigh. She didn't notice. No one ever does, until it's too late. As she walked into the living room, the hallway mirror rippled behind her, and in its surface, Ethan's reflection stayed behind, smiling wider than any human could,